The Starlight Imperium's colossal liner glinted under a swirl of distant galaxies, a gleaming testament to humanity's reach across the void. Inside its opulent belly, passengers bustled with an air of excited anticipation. Among them was Thomas, a young software engineer finally escaping the daily grind with his wife Emily and Emily's good friend from work, Anne. "Whoa, you guys, check out that pool!" Anne bounced beside them, her eyes wide with excitement. "I can't wait to soak up the poolside view from there." Thomas chuckled. "According to the marketing, it has the best views of any pool in the galaxy." For the trio of companions, the promise of celestial adventures had been too tempting to resist. The Spacefarer cruise line boasted gourmet dining, cosmic spa treatments, and excursions on exotic planets. It was the definition of an interstellar dream vacation, or so they had thought. The first hint of something wrong was barely a tickle of unease. A whispered detour through the ship's intercom, a flicker of lights in the hallway. Thomas had brushed it off, absorbed in setting up their plush cabin. "It's probably just a systems glitch," he assured Emily, frowning at the blinking wall panel. "Big ship, big tech, it happens." Yet the disquiet clung. An odd vibration thrummed through the floor. That's when the lights went out. The Starlight Imperium was plunged into darkness. Panic rippled through the ship, cries of alarm echoing against the cold metal walls. Thomas's grip on Emily tightened. "It'll be all right," he murmured, more to convince himself than his wife. Phosphorescent emergency lights painted an eerie glow on the corridor. The intercom flickered to life, a crackling voice sputtering apologies. "Navigation malfunction. Corrective measures underway. Thank you for your patience." A navigation malfunction? How was that even possible in an era where the fastest ships zipped between galaxies? Thomas's mind whirred, searching for plausible reasons. Suddenly the ship lurched, a violent tremor throwing them against the wall. Anne shrieked, fear rolling over her pale face. "What's happening?" Emily shouted over a chorus of terrified screams. Thomas held his wife close, a knot of dread forming in his gut. This was no system glitch. Outside the viewport, the familiar constellations had twisted, replaced by a sea of impossible red and sickly green stars. Whispers slithered through the corridors. "Lost. Off course. Unknown sector." Dread morphed into terror. He exchanged a desperate look with Emily. They had to find answers. Navigating the labyrinth of corridors became a nightmare. Passengers huddled in groups, their murmurings a mix of speculation and terror. Thomas caught snippets of unsettling rumours, an old data glitch in the ship's star maps, a detour to avoid space debris gone horribly wrong. The hum of the engines shifted, an undertone of strain reverberating through the ship. Were they slowing? Was the Starlight Imperium even heading anywhere, or were they hopelessly adrift? "We have to find the bridge and see what the captain knows," Emily said through gritted teeth. Thomas knew she was right. They couldn't sit passively in this mounting chaos. Anne nodded in agreement as she huddled close to the couple. The search proved more difficult than anticipated. Their path was constantly blocked by bewildered throngs or frantic crew members rushing in unknown directions. The ship seemed to be bleeding order and control, its luxurious veneer crumbling under the weight of the unknown. Finally, they stumbled onto a balcony overlooking the ship's command center. Below the bridge was a scene of controlled chaos. Officers barking orders, screens flickering with impossible star charts. At the center, a grim-faced figure, presumably the captain, spoke urgently into a communication device. Thomas caught fragments of the conversation. "Coordinates. Corrupted. Unknown entity. Repeat. Entity on the scanners." He turned to Emily and Anne, the word echoing ominously in the air. "Entity?" His voice trembled slightly. The Starlight Imperium lurched again before they could decipher the chilling phrase, sending them sprawling. This was no tremor, but a violent shudder, as if something gargantuan had bumped against the ship's hull. Sirens blared. the urgent pulse of alarm sending spikes of cold fear through Thomas. He scrambled upright, dragging his wife and Anne toward the exit. In the ensuing rush, they were separated from the throng. Frantically, they searched for familiar faces but found themselves trapped in a disorienting side corridor, the usual gleaming chrome replaced by dimly lit maintenance tunnels. Anne whispered, her skin unnaturally pale. "I don't like it here. Everything seems wrong." "I know, right?" Emily replied, nervously rubbing her arms. The air grew colder, and an odd, oily smell clung to every surface. Thomas tried to rationalize it away. Perhaps an emergency ventilation system was kicking in, but the unease in his gut roared louder than any logic. The lights flickered ominously, and shadows stretched like gnarled limbs across the walls. Were they moving on their own? A hiss, like air escaping a pressurized tank, echoed behind them. Before Thomas could turn, a wave of inky darkness washed over them, enveloping them in a chilling embrace. Anne screamed a gut-wrenching cry, which was cut short as silence enveloped them. Thomas felt Emily's hand slip from his, the world dissolving into an oppressive, smothering blackness. Before the darkness claimed his mind, his last coherent thought was a desperate prayer for Emily and Anne. When Thomas regained his senses, he was alone. The air hung thick and stale, tasting faintly metallic on his tongue. He blinked against the oppressive darkness, eyes straining to find any light source. A faint greenish glow painted the room's far corner, if it could still be called a room. The walls had an odd, pulsing texture, like living flesh. Had the ship transformed? "Emily? Anne?" His voice cracked, fear lacing every syllable. Silence was his only answer. Panic threatened to consume him, but he fought it back. Emily and Anne were out there. He needed to find them, save them from whatever had swallowed them whole. Cautiously, he followed the sickly glow, his boots squishing against a damp, yielding floor. The passageway twisted and narrowed, the strange walls seeming to close in on him. A soft, mournful wail echoed ahead. His heart pounded. "Anne?" The wail grew louder, laced with stark terror. Thomas pushed forward, his stomach churning. The passageway opened into a dimly lit chamber, and there, curled in a fetal position, was Anne. "Anne!" Thomas rushed towards her, relief washing over him like a tidal wave. But as he drew closer, something was wrong. Anne's sobs were deep and guttural, her body shaking spasmodically. She clutched at her head, her fingernails digging into her scalp as if trying to tear something out. "Anne, it's all right. I'm here. Where's Emily?" Anne whipped around, her face contorted in a grotesque mask of anguish. But her eyes had changed. They were no longer human, as they glowed with a sickly yellow light, radiating a malevolence that chilled Thomas to the bone. "It hurts inside," Anne croaked, her voice warped, inhuman. Thomas recoiled in horror. This wasn't Anne anymore. Before Thomas could react, Anne lurched at him, her hands wrapping around his throat. Thomas panicked, and at that moment he fell backward, taking Anne with him. As he fell to the ground, her momentum shot her forward, causing her head to slam into the wall. Thomas heard a loud thud, and Anne's body slumped to the floor. Thomas jumped to his feet. He didn't bother to see the outcome of her header on the wall. His fight-or-flight mode kicked in, and he chose flight. He took off down the corridor, leaving the demonic version of Anne sprawled on the floor. As he hurtled further into the corrupted heart of the Starlight Imperium, Thomas knew one thing with chilling certainty. Whatever hellish game this entity that boarded the ship was playing wasn't over, as he could hear passengers' screams in far-off areas. Heart-pounding, Thomas followed his instincts to move away from the screams, but remained in search of his wife. He wriggled through ventilation ducts slick with foul-smelling fluid, bypassed failing power nodes with trembling fingers, and forced open, rusted emergency access hatches to avoid main corridors as much as possible. The deeper he delved into the ship, the more grotesque his surroundings became. His engineer's mind was so used to logic and predictability that he struggled to comprehend the impossibility of it all. It was as if the ship were a living, diseased organism, the entity of its malignant cancer. Finally, he arrived at a sealed chamber. Warning lights pulsed around a thick blast door etched with biological hazard symbols. The data pad flickered with the words, "Waste Management Area." Emily's strangled cries, echoing from somewhere beyond this door, steeled his resolve. He punched in the override code, the door grinding open with a hiss of escaping gas. He stepped into a scene of biomechanical horror. The walls pulsed with fleshy tubes intertwined with fiber optic cables. At the center, a writhing mass pulsed and throbbed. Emily was cocooned within the structure, a hideous creature fused to her body, its tendrils burrowing into her skin. Her yellow eyes locked with his, pleading and filled with pain. Beside the monstrous form was a control panel bristling with mismatched tech-ancient dials, cutting-edge touchscreens, and even crude hand-scrawled notes. It was insane, illogical, and it might be his only chance. The creature sensed his presence. It whipped around, a shriek tearing from its warped maw, slowly separating itself from Emily to prepare to confront the human intruder. Thomas's instincts screamed at him to retreat, but his legs were rooted to the spot. He dove for the control panel, his fingers fumbling over the haphazard layout. The control panel mentioned a system flush sequence designed to eject the trash in the room into the void of space. It was a desperate gamble, but it would at least separate Emily from the monster. Putting his tech skills to use, he activated the sequence. He moved quickly to another area as he squeezed into a crevice in the wall. Alarms blared, lights strobing manically. The creature reared back, its shriek raising goosebumps on his skin. The entity was too slow to realize what was about to happen. Air was sucked out of the room as the countdown hit 0. Emily blacked out, but the sturdiness of the cocoon kept her embedded in the floor. And then, with a final, sickening squelch, the monstrous mass was ejected, and the sequence ended faster than it had started. Thomas could only watch in nauseated horror as it shot past a viewport, a writhing blob hurtling into the blackness of space. He staggered to Emily, the floor tilting beneath him. She was slumped in the remnants of the organic cocoon, pale and barely breathing. "Emily," he croaked, his voice trembling. Her eyes fluttered open, mirroring his own weariness and fear. But they were her eyes, no longer tainted with that sickly yellow glow. "Thomas," she whispered, a weak smile tugging at her lips. Tears streamed down his face, a mix of overwhelming relief and utter exhaustion. He cradled her in his arms, his heart pounding a comforting rhythm against the backdrop of the still shuddering ship. Seeing Emily again had brought hope to Thomas's heart. Staring into his wife's eyes, he thought to himself that they would escape this nightmare and find their way home. Hey, space travelers, thanks for blasting off with Rocket Ship Radio. We hope you enjoyed this story about the Voyage of the Doomed. If you're ready to dive deeper into the rabbit hole of our amazing sci-fi stories, click the next video and prepare yourself for another adventure. If you want to help us, please hit the like button, subscribe, and activate that notification bell so you never miss an interstellar transmission. Don't forget to leave a comment below. Tell us what kind of sci-fi tales you want to explore in the future. And as always, safe travels, adventurer.